Commissioning is the most important phase of your project. It's what will determine if everything you've done prior to commissioning during procurement, design, and construction phases was successful. But most projects don't approach commissioning this way. Everyone is stuck in beginner mode and leaving commissioning to much later in the project. There is a better way to approach commissioning with a more sophisticated approach to protect your project investment. There are two aspects of industrial process commissioning to consider: planning for commissioning and execution of on-site testing. In this video, I'll explain each of these and how you can plan for your project commissioning success. Most people don't like paperwork. This is understandable. People want to focus on the fun stuff, the hands-on commissioning in the field. However, the success of your commissioning phase of your project is not determined by your on-site testing. The success of your commissioning is determined by everything that takes place prior to on-site testing. The decisions that are made and the actions that are taken during procurement, design, and construction phases of your project will determine how well your commissioning goes. You see, your project needs to be set up for success right from the beginning. You need to start with the end in mind when preparing contract documents and when selecting design and installation groups. It is not possible to out-commission a bad contract or unqualified project participants. Poorly defined contract documents will always lead to disputes during off-site factory acceptance testing and on-site testing. Instead of getting the job done, everyone is stuck arguing about what needs to be tested. This is why it is critical to have commissioning input during procurement processes early in your project. This makes sure that all gaps are closed and everything is defined up front. This is very possible to do, even in the absence of all design details. Too often, projects have a clear start, but do not clearly define the finish. This is not a good way to start projects. Think of projects like a large fire hose. Your project starts and money is spent. Eventually, the fire hose of money being paid out each month is enormous. Each month, more money is going out the door. This is to be expected for a period of time, but eventually you need a way to shut off the hose and stop the flow of money. That is only possible by successfully completing your project during commissioning. But too many projects are started and have no clear plan for how to shut off the fire hose of money. When the project was started, commissioning was an afterthought to be figured out later. Well, this is scary, that the fire hose of money is allowed to be turned on with no upfront and clear plan for how it will be shut off. It's no wonder the fire hose keeps pumping out money as your project scrambles to try to figure out how to shut it off during commissioning. Wouldn't a better approach be to do the upfront work to define commissioning during procurement so that everyone is clear how the project will end during commissioning? The decisions made during design activities will determine the success of your commissioning. There is an inherent disconnect between the design engineers working from the head office and the actual site implementation of the intended design. It is important to bridge this gap by having commissioning involved early in your project to provide feedback from the end of projects, commissioning, to earlier in projects, design. Having this feedback loop allows better decisions to be made during the design that can greatly improve the success of commissioning. When designs are allowed to be completed in isolation, any design errors are deferred to later in the project for the commissioning team to resolve. Or worse, what was designed cannot actually be installed and operated in the field. This is often referred to as a constructability review, but there is important operability feedback to be included as well. By the time issues are identified in the field after installation, the designers have moved on to their next project, and all the commissioning team can do is identify errors. The sequence of design activities must also be completed in the same order as the startup sequence. As an example, there is no reason to complete the chemical dosing subsystem design first if it is the last system in the startup sequence, as well as the last system that the construction group will complete. The commissioning team must prepare the commissioning and startup sequence required to achieve the project in-service date well in advance to provide guidance to all groups on the sequence and priorities of activities. Without this, design and construction packages will be out of sequence from startup, causing delays as subsystem interdependencies are not aligned. Closing the loop and allowing commissioning feedback into the design phase greatly increases your project's chance of success. The integration between construction quality management and commissioning needs special attention. This is the most complex transition in projects, and the details matter. This transition needs to be meticulously planned for well in advance so that there are no surprises. For example, there are multiple subsystems on projects and several questions to answer. When is each one required to be complete? In what order are they required to be completed? And what is the detailed definition actually of complete? I see too often that everyone's definition of complete means something different. The contractor's definition of complete means something completely different than the commissioning team's definition of complete. And the contract doesn't have the level of detail required to clarify what complete means and how this transition from construction to commissioning takes place. To address this, industry-best construction quality management processes are required, with a dedicated quality management team to ensure that the contractual quality requirements are met for the commissioning team to receive what they need, snag-free. Trying to save money with minimal quality oversight always costs more money in the end, as issues are deferred to commissioning, causing costly delays. Ensuring that properly structured construction quality processes are planned for is critical to the success of the commissioning phase of your project. Everything we've discussed up to this point is required prior to on-site commissioning. Skip any of these previous steps or do any of the previous steps poorly, and the commissioning phase of your project will not go well. It doesn't matter if you have the best commissioning team and the best procedures for testing, nothing will go well if the previous phases of your project were done poorly. This too often gets missed. You have a spectacular commissioning team who can make miracles happen every day. They are the best at testing in the field. They have started up hundreds of systems in the past and can recite the entire Fibonacci sequence in their sleep. But they will not be able to work their magic if none of the previous phases of your project were properly planned. All the magic of commissioning is lost due to poor planning during previous phases. Now back to a statement I made earlier. Nobody likes the paperwork and everyone wants to focus on the sexy part of the project, the hands-on testing in the field. But by focusing only on the execution of testing, you're missing the most important part of the commissioning process. On-site testing is only one stage of the commissioning process, and all preceding stages of the commissioning process is what will determine if your on-site testing is successful. Following a structured commissioning process starting early in your project is what will determine the success of your project. Avoid earlier stages of the commissioning process and leave them as an afterthought, and your project is already on a path to failure. You can learn how to properly plan and execute all stages of commissioning and what takes place during each stage of commissioning at our site at www.commissioningandstartup.com. And best of all, you can get started for free. Sign up for our free 3-day mini course, which will walk you through all the steps of what we just discussed and tell you how to get started. See you in the course.